swear affirm the testimony you give to court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. If you'll have a seat over there, please. If you'll state your name and spell your last name.
My name is Kerry Breen. Last name is B-R-E-E-N.
How you doing? How do you spell your first name?
K-E-R-R-Y.
Pastor Breen, can you tell the jury a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background and how you came to be a pastor?
I'm an ordained Assemblies of God minister. I came to South Carolina in 1994 to pastor Central Assembly of God, and stayed there, retired. I left pastoral ministry in December of 2016, December 31st, 2016. During that time, my church was involved in helping ex-offenders. We started a substance abuse program that became probably one of the biggest faith-based substance abuse programs in Columbia, and was involved in helping people that had experienced problems in their lives. I became acquainted with KCC Corps because I was providing a residential substance abuse treatment for men, and Richland County Public Defender's Office and the Solicitor's Office would place men that had substance abuse problems in my program. So that's kind of how I came to South Carolina, or kind of my history.
How did you come to be a pastor? What was your background that led you into ministry?
I was a teenager, and then I joined the Marine Corps in 1976. Stayed in the Marine Corps for 4 years. During that time, I became a Christian and started to attend an Assemblies of God church, and felt called to the ministry. In 1980, I went to Bible college in Florida at Southeastern University, and in 1983 I was ordained as a pastor in the Assemblies of God. I've pastored 3 churches in my career.
And were you contacted by my office in 2015 in relation to Tim Jones' case? And can you tell the jury what was going on?
I was contacted by Mr. Young to see if I would consider providing spiritual support for Tim. And so I spent some time thinking about it. I had heard what had happened, and I spent some time thinking about it and praying about it, and I felt like as a minister in Columbia, that I had a responsibility to minister not just to people that didn't have problems, but people that did have problems. And so I did make a commitment to visit Tim and provide spiritual support for Tim.
And is this after Tim had tried to commit suicide at the prison?
Right.
And did you go meet with Tim?
I did.
And how many times did you meet with him?
I can't remember exactly how many times, but it was between at least 10 and 20 times that I met with Tim. I met with him at Kirkland, and then I met with him at Lee County. So I met with him somewhere in that kind of that number.
And can you tell the jury about your meetings with him? What was that like? What did y'all do?
When I first met Tim, he asked me, "Did you know what I did?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And he said, "Will that affect you ministering to me?" And I said, "No, it won't." And I really, to tell you the truth, is I did not spend a lot of time talking with Tim about the case. I felt like it was my job to provide spiritual support for Tim. So I dwelt on, what we did was we would read the scripture together. We would talk about the scripture. I taught Tim some Christian songs, and we would sing them together, and we would end our meeting with prayer. And that's really was the context of our meetings. There was one time where Tim did talk to me about what had happened in a penitential way, and I did lead him in a prayer of forgiveness. But I did not make it my intention to focus on the case or what had happened, but to help him spiritually.
When you and Tim talked about his faith, did y'all talk about things like sparing the rod and that women's place in the home or in the religion? Did those discussions come up?
I can't say that we had a discussion about that per se. I do know that from talking with Tim, he had a very literal interpretation of the scripture. I did notice that it was black or white. There wasn't any gray area in between for Tim, which I think was a problem for his Christian life. Because I don't think we can approach, first of all, I don't think we can approach the scripture with a literal interpretation. Jesus said a lot of things that we can't literally apply. Jesus said, poke out your eye and cut off your hand. Well, if we do that, we'll all be blind and limbless. So that's a parable. So you can't take that as a literal. And as far as black and white thinking goes, I mean, people make mistakes. It's not yes or no. We make mistakes as human beings, and I think that did cause Tim problems in his life.
Are those beliefs that he espouses, are those part of the Pentecostal faith?
No. I'm part of the Assemblies of God. It's the largest Pentecostal denomination in the world with over 70 million adherents. 1 in 4 Christians in the world are Pentecostal. The Assemblies of God is second to the Catholic Church in adherence. And the Assemblies of God does not believe in violence or extreme punishments of children. And for the most part, we've been a nonviolent movement. So it's not a part of the Pentecostal church. But there may be Pentecostals that have views like that.
Is Tim's faith real?
Objection, Your Honor. That would be speculation. I don't think anybody can answer the man who holds it.
Rephrase, you can ask something similar, but rephrase your question.
How did Tim express your faith? What did you think?
I think that Tim had a real faith, but I think that it was based in externals and not in internals. And I think that that's the failure of any kind of a religion. When it's only based in the externals and not in the internals, then we miss the truth of what faith is about. But I do think he had a very real experience, and tried to go to church and live out that faith.
Does Tim believe that he will be reunited or can be reunited with his children?
Well, the Pentecostal religion believes that people can be forgiven and redeemed in heaven. I'm just talking about heaven. So I think that Tim does believe that he's going to be reunited with his children. And I think the Bible does teach that.
Can Tim have a positive impact on other people in prison?
I think he can. I think we've seen many men that have committed done horrible things, experience redemption, and they may not ever be able to be in society again, but they can be. They can have a beneficial influence on other men that have committed crimes or acts that are considered to be horrible.
Thank you, Pastor Breen.
Thank you.
Is that your question to say that?
Pastor, I understand you said the faith as you teach it and as you discussed it with Mr. Jones, there's nothing in your faith or the Christian faith as you know it that allows for mistreatment, brutal beatings, or even killings of children? Is that correct?
No, sir, I do not believe in that kind of behavior.
That a man should honor, love his wife? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
That children have a special place?
I do believe that.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Breen, do things that happen to children matter or affect them later in life?
Objection beyond my scope? Beyond the scope of what I asked.
Yes. Children, how is
Thank you, sir.
Call Sergeant Barry Sowards.
My name is Barry Sowards. Last name is spelled Sowards.
Sergeant Sowards, where are you employed?
I'm employed with the Lexington County Sheriff's Department.
And how long have you been employed with them?
19 years, 19 to 20.
Is that your entire law enforcement experience?
No.
Can you tell me about what you did prior to coming to Lexington County?
Prior to that, I worked 4 years on street patrol at Columbia Police Department. And then prior to that, I had done a 5-year stint in the United States Air Force.
And since you said you've been at Lexington County 19 to 20 years, all at the Sheriff's Department, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you tell me when you started off there, what was your job?
When I first started Lexington County Sheriff's Department, I was hired to be a school resource officer. I worked in that capacity for approximately 6 years. I was promoted to the rank of sergeant, where I was a patrol sergeant in the west and south region of Lexington County. And then in late 2009, I was lateral transferred to my current position, which is the Fugitive Task Force Sergeant for Lexington County.
Can you tell me what the sergeant for the Fugitive Task Force, what do you do?
So we locate, we go after folks who have warrants, and it's our job to locate those folks who have warrants and then bring them back to Lexington County so that they can stand trial for the crimes they're accused of.
And as part of that job, have you been in court or transporting Tim?
Yes, I have. I've been with him pretty much the entirety from the time he was originally picked up.
Coming around almost 5 years.
Yes.
And is it fair to say then that you've got extensive experience dealing with inmates and/or defendants in your job?
And yes.
Have those individuals been rude to you before?
Yes.
Gotten physical with you?
Absolutely.
Tried to fight you?
Yes.
I mean, unfortunately, that's kind of a common thing in your job, correct?
It is.
And can you just describe to the jury during, I guess, the last 6 to 7 weeks, including the picking of the jury, what has your job kind of been?
So my superiors have put me in charge of basically being Mr. Jones's handler for the duration of the trial, either myself or my team members, in which we'll go to the jail every morning, pick up Mr. Jones, make sure he's on time, that he's properly dressed, and that he meets all his court dates during this trial through its entirety.
And were you part of the team that extradited Tim from Mississippi?
I was.
Kind of give the jury an idea, how long of a drive was that?
My recollection is somewhere in the area of maybe 9 hours.
During that time, did Tim give you any problems with the transport?
No.
Was he compliant to you?
Yes,
Was he courteous?
he was.
Did he ever do anything in the transport that made you as a law enforcement officer feel uncomfortable?
I never felt uncomfortable. Of course, transporting someone with those charges, obviously have a heightened level of security, more so than most, but he never did anything while I transported him that raised my suspicion.
At some point in time, I guess during the transport, you stopped to get food. Did Tim ask you something or say something to you at that point in time?
He did. We had stopped at a restaurant. Two of my detectives went inside to get some food. I stayed inside the vehicle with Mr. Jones. I had a H&K UMP automatic weapon on my lap, and Mr. Jones looked at me and said, "You guys don't need automatic weapons for me, or I'm not going to hurt you."
And after you ended up bringing Tim back to South Carolina, did you have more interactions with him?
I did. Most every time he was transported, it was done by either myself, accompanied with other team members, pretty much for the last 5 years.
So any court hearings, any appointments, you were part of that transport team with Tim?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you give me an idea of how many times you think that might have been?
I don't know the exact number. I would assume somewhere in the area of maybe 14 times, and each time consisted of at least an 8-hour day.
So you were with him that entire time?
Yes.
And initially, he was housed at MSU at Kirkland. What is that?
It's the maximum security unit at Kirkland. It's the highest level of security in a prison that we have here in South Carolina. It's reserved for safekeepers or individuals that have been charged with a pretty violent crime.
So that's over off of Broad River Road?
Yes.
And the maximum security, I mean, that's where generally people who have gotten in trouble at other institutions within SEDC go, correct?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that they're there.
And then you had also mentioned safekeepers. And I guess you said that that's where Tim was a safekeeper?
He was labeled a safekeeper by the State Department of Corrections.
And what does that mean?
Safekeepers are individuals that they keep away from every other inmate in the Department of Corrections, no matter where they're housed in the Department of Corrections, a number of prisons throughout the state. They're labeled with a special uniform that they wear to where they're easily identified who they are, and they're not to have any contact with any other prison inmate whatsoever within the facility.
And so Lexington County made that designation and sent him to MSU, correct?
It was Lexington County that made the decision to transfer him to the state prison, yes.
And at some point in time, I guess MSU at Kirkland went away and Tim was placed somewhere else. Where was that?
He was transferred from MSU or Supermax to the Lee County Correctional Institution, which is also governed by the State Department of Corrections, South Carolina.
And is that in Bishopville?
Yes, it is.
So down I-20?
About an hour and 15 minutes.
And during those times that you would transport Tim back to appointments or court appearances, did he give you any problems?
No, he didn't.
Was he always compliant?
He did what I asked him.
Was he courteous?
He was.
Did he do anything during those transports that made you feel uncomfortable?
No, at the time, during that time at Lee County, he was on quite a bit of medication at that point, so he was pretty sedated.
And I think as you mentioned early on, you've been basically security over Tim at the trial.
Yes.
Fair to say that you've been with him almost times 12 hours a day, 5 days a week?
That would be accurate.
I guess we're in either week 6 or 7.
Correct.
During the time that you've been bringing him here, been with him here, Has he given you any problems?
He has not.
Has he been compliant with you?
He's been compliant, yes.
Has he been courteous?
Yes.
Has he done anything to make you feel uncomfortable?
No, there were a couple times he stepped over the line of where I asked him to be, but that was a mental mistake more than him just not complying with what I asked him.
Nothing intentional that made you think that he was trying to do anything?
I don't believe so.
And at some point in time during the trial, did you notice something different going on with Tim?
Probably the second or third day of when the trial began, I noticed Mr. Jones had a couple different facial expressions that I was not used to. He was turning around really quick, looking to the back of the courtroom, which initially raised my concern, and then I realized what he was trying to do was look at the clock and see what time it was. After court was over, we went to the back, and I noticed he was pretty quiet, and usually, since he's been off his medication, he's a little chatty. And he was quiet that day, and I said, "Hey, what's wrong with you?" I said, "Are you okay?" And I thought it was just, he was down about the trial. And he said, "Hey, I'm okay." I said, "Well, if you're not okay, you need to let me know so that I can facilitate, whatever you need," since I've basically been put in that position to be his overwatch, basically. And he was reluctant, but he told me, he said, "I'm hearing voices. I need to talk to a doctor." So it was at that point when I got him back to the jail, I notified the staff in the jail for his care so that they could sit down and talk with him about whatever's going on.
And did they change his medication after that?
To my knowledge, the staff did say they changed his Geodon. I think it went from 40 to 60 milligrams of Geodon.
And once they did that, did you notice a change back to kind of Tim's baseline?
He did, yes. He wavered from day to day depending on how the trial was going. But, yeah, I did see a difference in him.
And so this was something that you talked with Tim about. He didn't come to you with it.
Yeah, I initially confronted him about it because he was quiet that day.
During this almost 5-year period, have you and Tim had non-job related conversations?
Yes.
At some point during the trial, did y'all have a conversation about a banana?
Yes, it was probably maybe the second week in the trial. He was eating a banana, and in the morning time, he made an odd comment about, gorillas or monkeys eat bananas the opposite of how we eat them. And I asked him, I said, what are you talking about? So he had the banana in his hand before he peeled it, and he turned it upside down, and he started peeling the banana from the bottom, what we would consider the bottom rather than the top. And I said, well, that's kind of neat. You taught me something. I didn't know that.
I noticed yesterday that Tim had not shaved. Can you tell me why, or tell the jury why?
Yesterday?
Yes, sir.
He, when he came out of his holding area, I usually handcuff him and belly belt and get him ready for transport to bring in. And I noticed he had like a day's worth of growth on his face. And I asked him, I said, "Hey, did you not shave? Why did you not shave?" He said, "Well, they gave me the opportunity to shave." He said, "But I knew I was going to be running late, and I didn't want to make anybody late, so I just went ahead and here I am."
So he didn't want to make the transport team late getting him here.
That's what he said.
In Lexington, it's customary for the litigants at both tables to kind of stand up when the jury's coming in and out as a show of respect for the jury. Has that seemed important to Tim?
Oh, yeah, it has.
Oftentimes, myself or the other attorneys might be working on something or preparing to get ready of a witness. What would Tim do if we weren't standing up when they started to come in?
He would make it a point to tell everybody to stand up, and in fact, it become an internal joke about that.
And what was that internal joke that someone should do to Tim?
The suggestion was made that one of the attorneys hold his shirt tail down so he can't get up.
And you perceive that would have upset him.
Yes,
And as part of your job as kind of his handler, you keep an eye on him in the entire trial?
I do.
Have you seen him cry?
Yes,
Do you believe that those were crocodile tears?
Judge, in your honor, speculation.
I stand objection.
When you've seen him crying, do you believe that his remorse is real?
Objection, speculation.
During the entire time, this 5 years that you've been with him, has he given you any problems?
no,
Has he been compliant with you?
he has.
Has he been courteous?
He has.
Has he made you feel uncomfortable?
It's difficult to answer. In one point, he has not particularly made me uncomfortable. The level or the heightened sense of the charges is what makes me uncomfortable on a daily basis. And not necessarily with him, but the level of charges is what I deal with.
Sure. So you're always on watch for that, but he hasn't done anything within the job that's made you feel uncomfortable.
That's correct.
Fair to say that Tim has been a model inmate?
He has with me.
That's all the questions I have.
No question, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Done for the day, so y'all eat lunch wherever you like. Here's the reason. The state witnesses went a little quicker than they anticipated. The defense was lining their witnesses up, not knowing that. Their witnesses are all lined up Monday morning. These two were available, so we called them. We're done for the weekend. So Monday morning, 9 o'clock, we'll start again. Leave it here, discuss the case, don't do any research. If anybody influence you about your decision or what's going on, we'll talk about the case with anyone. See you Monday morning.